She was a drifter with scar on her face, until a cowboy loved her, unaware she owned half the state. "Please, you have to let me hide. If they catch me, I'm dead." "Ma'am, I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, but bleeding in the middle of a cattle trail ain't a good way to hide." Jace Carter pulled his horse to a halt, the beast snorting at the sudden tension in the air. The sun was beginning to dip low over the Texas hills, casting long shadows through the dust. In the middle of the dirt path, tangled in brush and bleeding from a wound on her side, was a woman. Her hair was matted with sweat and dirt, her clothes torn and stained, and her face, marked by a long, cruel scar that slashed from cheekbone to jawline, was twisted in fear. He dismounted slowly, keeping his hands where she could see them. "Name's Jace. I ain't gonna hurt you," he said. The woman backed away, one trembling hand gripping her side, the other raised as if to warn him off. "They're coming, please." From the distance came the faint rumble of an engine. A truck, maybe two. Jace's eyes narrowed. He glanced toward the road behind him, then back at the woman. "What's your name?" he asked, already pulling his canteen from the saddlebag. "May," she whispered. "Well, May, we don't have time for explanations. Can you ride?" She hesitated, then nodded faintly. He helped her up onto his horse, lifting her as gently as he could despite her flinch at his touch. Once she was settled, he climbed up behind her and steered them off the trail, away from the sound of the approaching vehicles. He led them through the scrub brush, weaving between mesquite trees and dry gullies until his ranch came into view, a patch of land half swallowed by wilderness, with a weather-beaten barn, an old windmill, and a main house that had seen better decades. He brought the horse to the side of the barn and slid off, then helped her down. "You'll be safest here," he said, leading her into the back of the barn where a disused tack room sat in shadows. It still smelled of old hay and leather. "You'll need to stay quiet. I got a few hunting rifles, but I'd rather not get into it if we can avoid it." May sank onto a bale of hay, wincing. "You're hurt," he said. "I'll live." He hesitated, then nodded and shut the door gently behind him. Minutes later, headlights swept across the front of his property. Two matte black pickup trucks rolled up the drive and came to a grinding halt. Men stepped out, 4 in total, wearing dusty boots, military haircuts, and expressions too cold to belong to neighbors. Jace walked out onto the porch, casually sipping from a chipped mug. "Evening," he said. One of the men, taller than the rest and clearly the one in charge, stepped forward. "We're looking for someone. Seen a woman come through here? About yay high, dark hair, scar on her face." Jace furrowed his brow and shook his head slowly. "Scarred woman in this part of Texas? Can't say I have. I've only seen my cows today and they ain't talking." The man didn't laugh. "She's dangerous, may be armed. Might have taken something that don't belong to her." Jace squinted at the speaker. "Ain't no one come by here. Just me, this land, and my stubborn old gelding." One of the men walked around the porch, peering toward the barn. "Mind if we take a look?" the leader asked. "I do mind," Jace said, stepping down onto the dirt. "Private property." The two men locked eyes, tension simmering. The hum of cicadas filled the silence. Finally, the man stepped back. "You see anyone, you let us know." "I'll holler real loud," Jace replied dryly. The men climbed back into their trucks. Engines revved, tires spun, and they disappeared down the dirt road in a cloud of dust. Only when the sound faded completely did Jace turn and walk back toward the barn. Inside the tack room, May sat motionless in the corner, her eyes wide, her breathing shallow. He knelt beside her and placed the mug of water in her hands. "They're gone. For now." She looked up at him, voice cracking. "Why'd you help me?" Jace shrugged. "You looked like you'd been through hell. I ain't the type to let someone get dragged back into it." May clutched the mug tightly. "If they find me here, they'll kill you too." Jace met her gaze, steady and unafraid. "Then let's make sure they don't." The days that followed moved slow, like syrup down a tree in spring. May didn't say much, but her presence grew into the rhythm of Jace's ranch like she'd always belonged there. She rose with the sun and worked without complaint, mending fence wire, hauling feed, even cooking meals that surprised Jace with their balance of simplicity and skill. She knew how to shoe a horse, how to properly wrap a rope, how to clean a rifle without fumbling, not the kind of knowledge that came from drifting from town to town. And yet every time Jace looked at her, he saw a woman carrying something too heavy for one pair of shoulders. She never took off the faded red scarf she wore around her neck, always tugged slightly to one side so it half covered the long scar on her left cheek. On hotter days, she let her hair hang low over her face instead, always angling herself so people, well, mostly Jace, would not get too good a look. Jace noticed, of course, but never mentioned it. He wasn't one for pushing. What he did instead was pay attention. He watched how she avoided mirrors, how her eyes shifted when he got too close. But he also saw how gently she brushed the horses, how she hummed under her breath when making coffee, how she paused to look at the sky when she thought no one was watching. By the end of the first week, it was clear to Jace that May wasn't just passing through. She was hiding, healing, or maybe both. And though he knew better than to fall for trouble, trouble had never looked so fragile, or so fierce. One evening, as the wind picked up and dusk painted the fields in purple and gold, they sat together on the fence rail, watching the horses graze in the pasture. Jace passed her a chipped mug of sweet tea and leaned back on his elbow. "You handle horses better than most ranch hands I've seen." May took a slow sip. "They don't lie to you. You hurt them, they run. You feed them, they stay." "That simple, huh?" She nodded. "People should be more like horses." Jace chuckled lightly. "Maybe they are. Most just scared to show it." May stared out at the pasture. "This one," she said, pointing to the roan mare with the white blaze. "She startles every time she hears boots behind her. You see that?" Jace glanced at the mare and nodded. "Yeah." "She was beaten," May said softly. "I can tell. Horses remember pain, even when the wounds heal." Jace looked at her. She wasn't talking about horses anymore. May continued, her voice nearly swallowed by the breeze. "She's always listening for what might come next, never trusts the silence." He didn't say anything. Just let the silence sit between them without pressure. Then she turned to him, eyes shadowed. "I'm the same. I flinch at footsteps. I wake up ready to run. I can't stand the sound of shouting." Jace leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "You're safe here, May." She shook her head slowly. "You don't know that." "I do," he said gently, "because I've seen fear, lived with it long enough to know when someone's running from more than just danger." She swallowed hard. Her hand went to the scarf, tugging it a little tighter. Jace noticed, and for the first time, he spoke the truth she probably feared hearing. "You can cover that scar all you want," he said, voice calm but certain, "but you don't need to hide who you are around here." May blinked fast, then looked away. "You say that now. I'll say it again tomorrow, and the next day too," he said. "Not because I pity you, but because you're more than what hurt you." The mug trembled slightly in her grip. She set it down and stood, brushing hay from her jeans. She didn't thank him, didn't nod, didn't cry. But as she walked back toward the barn, the scarf slipped just enough for the last of the light to catch the edge of the scar, and for the first time, she didn't pull it back up. It was nearing sundown when Jace reached for the canvas duffel May kept tucked behind the feed barrels in the barn. He was searching for extra rope, but instead his hand brushed something small and cold. He pulled it out. A silver locket, worn and old, with delicate engravings that caught the dim barn light. He turned it over. On the back, in elegant cursive, were two initials, M.M. He didn't open it, didn't need to. Something in his gut said this locket wasn't just jewelry. It was a name, a past, a secret. Later that evening, he set the locket gently on the kitchen table between them. May stared at it like it was a loaded gun. "Found this while looking for rope," Jace said quietly. "Didn't open it." She didn't move. Didn't speak. "I figure if you've got a different name than what you told me, I won't hold it against you. But I won't ignore it either." May exhaled slowly, then pulled the locket toward her. Her fingers trembled as they touched the metal. My name isn't May, she whispered. It's Meredith. Meredith McCallan. Jace didn't flinch, just waited. She took a deep breath, then began. My family owns more land in Texas than some countries. Ranches, oil rights, old money stretching back generations. My father ran McCallan Holdings like a kingdom. After he passed, my brother took control of the board and started selling off land illegally, hiding money, cutting dirty deals. I found out, her voice caught, but she pushed forward. I threatened to go public. He offered me a deal, go silent, take a cut, and disappear. I refused. That night I was drugged. When I woke up, my car was in a ravine, on fire. If I hadn't crawled out in time, they would have declared me dead. Jace leaned forward. And the scar? She touched her cheek unconsciously. From the crash, and maybe from the betrayal more than the glass. She opened the locket then, and inside was a photo, an old one, of her younger self, smiling with her father beside a horse, both dressed in full Western regalia. I ran, she said, took files, flash drives, documents, everything that proves what they've done. I've been hunted ever since. Jace sat back, processing. So why here? Why this place? I didn't plan it, she said. My truck broke down 3 towns over. I ran when I saw them again. I didn't mean to stumble into your land. But you stayed, she nodded, because for the first time in my life I could breathe. I wasn't a name, I wasn't an heir, I was just May. She rubbed her face, frustrated. I have money, I have power, I have land I technically still own. But none of it matters. I don't sleep through the night. I flinch at every knock. I keep waiting for someone to drag me back into that life. Then her voice cracked, and the walls she had built crumbled in a single sentence. I have everything, except peace. Her head dropped into her hands as the tears came fast and raw. Jace reached across the table and took her hand, firm but gentle. Then we start there, he said softly, with peace. She looked up, eyes red and tired. You're not scared? Not even a little? Course I'm scared, he said, smiling faintly. But fear never stopped me from doing what's right. She gave a broken laugh, wiping her cheeks. You're either brave or stupid. Bit of both, he replied. She squeezed his hand. Thank you. You're welcome, he said. Now finish your tea. You've got land to defend and a world to take back. But not tonight. Tonight, you rest. And for the first time since she'd run, Meredith McCallan let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. The fire came just after midnight. It started with the low crackle of dry wood igniting in the night wind, followed by the sharp scent of smoke that curled beneath the doors of the main house. Then came the horses, whinnying, frantic, hooves thundering as the blaze lit the darkness with hungry orange teeth. Jace bolted upright in bed, heart pounding. He threw on his boots and shirt, grabbed the rifle by the door and burst outside. The barn was burning. Flames clawed at the old roof, sparks shooting toward the sky. His first thought wasn't the structure, it was May. She'd taken to sleeping in the tack room some nights, saying the silence helped her think. May, he shouted, but she was already running toward him from the opposite side, her face ghost white in the firelight. They're here, she panted. I saw them, at least 3, circling. They set it on fire. Before Jace could respond, a gunshot cracked through the night. A bullet hit the dirt near his feet. Run, he barked, pushing her behind the water trough. Get to the back pasture. Follow the creek. What about you? I'll buy time. Before she could argue, he was already moving, cutting around the smoke, firing a warning shot toward the shadow near the barn. The next few moments were chaos, shapes in the dark, muffled voices, a sudden punch to the side of his ribs. Then a second man lunging from behind the wagon, tackling Jace hard onto the dirt. Fists flew, wild and brutal. He fought back with everything he had, but they were trained lamely. Ruthless. One landed a blow to his temple with the butt of a pistol, and the world went sideways. The last thing he saw was the blur of a figure disappearing into the trees. May. Darkness swallowed everything after that. When Jace opened his eyes again, it was daytime. Faint light filtered through old wooden slats, the smell of burnt wood mixed with something warm. Stew, maybe. His body screamed in pain with every breath. He tried to move, but felt a firm hand press against his shoulder. "Don't." The voice was soft, trembling, familiar. He turned his head. May was sitting beside him, eyes bloodshot, a bowl of broth in her lap. She looked exhausted, her hair pulled back in a messy knot, her scarf missing, scar fully visible in the daylight. "How long?" he managed to rasp. "3 days," she said. "You had a concussion, bruised ribs, split lip. I thought—" She swallowed. "I thought I'd lost you." He blinked slowly, the world still foggy. "I dragged you out," she said. "When they left, I came back, put out what I could, hid you in the cellar under the feed room. Stitched what I could, used every trick I know." Jace tried to sit up again, groaning. "They still around?" "No," she said. "They think I'm gone. But they'll come back." He looked at her. Really looked. She was all sharp lines and exhaustion, the scar across her face a jagged memory carved in skin. But her eyes, God, her eyes, were fire and storm and everything he'd never let himself hope for. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "for bringing this down on you." She shook her head, eyes glistening. "You didn't bring this, I did. But you stayed." Jace closed his eyes again, too tired to speak. And that's when she said it, in the quiet of the barn, with the last embers of the fire still smoldering outside. She leaned close to him, her fingers brushing his bruised hand. "You never looked at me like the others do," she whispered. "You never stared at the scar, never winced, never saw me as broken." A tear slipped down her cheek. "You looked at me like I was real, like I mattered, like I was someone worth saving." She pressed her forehead gently to his, breathing in the moment. "Don't die on me, Jace. Please. You're the only one who ever saw me like a person, not a possession, like I was more than what they left behind." He didn't answer. His body was too broken for words, but his fingers curled slowly, weakly, around hers. That was enough. The morning Jace was finally strong enough to sit upright without groaning like a dying steer. The sky opened with a steady, soaking rain that drummed gently on the tin roof above them. It was the kind of rain that softened the world, muting everything but the steady rhythm of nature. Inside the old feed room, converted now into a makeshift recovery space, it was warm and dim, the scent of rain mingling with wood smoke and herbs steeping in a kettle. Meredith, still known as May to the world outside this ranch, stood near the small window, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her eyes were distant, following the lines of raindrops crawling down the glass, but her thoughts were elsewhere, tangled in everything they had endured and everything still to come. Jace stirred behind her, shifting slightly against the pillow. His voice, hoarse but dry with stubbornness, broke the silence. "You know, you could have let me rot in that ditch." She turned slowly, her mouth twitching into the smallest smile. "Believe me? I considered it." He grinned, even though it made his ribs ache. "Yeah, can't say I blame you." Walking over, she handed him a chipped mug of tea, warm and sweetened with just a bit of honey. "Drink this. It'll help." He took it with a quiet thanks and sipped slowly. 3 days, you said?" She nodded. "You were out cold most of it. Fever, concussion, broken rib. You looked like hell. I feel worse." "But you're alive." Jace looked up at her, eyes steady. "Because of you." She shrugged, but didn't deny it. Her hair was pulled back in a loose braid, damp from stepping outside earlier, and she had stopped wearing the scarf. The scar across her cheek was now as much a part of her as her voice, her walk, her gaze. She didn't hide it anymore. Not from him. "I'm staying," he said, voice low but certain. She blinked. "You're in no shape to be talking big." "I mean it," he rasped. "This land's mine, always has been, and now you're part of it. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm sure as hell not letting you go." She looked down, lips tightening, eyes misting. "You could be killed just for being near me." "I almost was," he said with a smirk. "Still here." She lowered herself into the chair beside his cot, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. "You really are stubborn." "Only about the important things." They sat like that for a moment, rain tapping softly on the roof, fire crackling nearby. Then she said it, the truth she had wrestled with in silence for too long. "I can't keep running, Jace. I thought I could, but after seeing you, after nearly losing you—" She trailed off, then found the strength again. "I choose to stay." Jace reached over and took her hand, rough fingers curling around hers. "No promises," he said. "No pretending this ends easy. But if we're going to take on the bastards who tried to bury you, we do it together." She nodded. Together. That night, for the first time in a long time, they slept side by side. Not out of desperation or lust, but out of something quieter and deeper. Trust. Meredith lay curled beside him, head on his shoulder, one hand resting lightly over his heart. In the mornings, they pored over documents, maps, and blueprints of corporate holdings. Meredith laid out everything she had smuggled from the McAllen vaults, proof of illegal land transfers, offshore accounts, bribed officials, and coded messages between board members, names, dates, signatures. "It's enough," she said. "If we send this to the right people, they'll fall." Jay studied the pages, not understanding all of it, but seeing the fire in her eyes. "Then let's make sure it gets where it needs to go." They worked during the day, Jace at the barn, Meredith coordinating safe drop points through the encrypted contacts she still had from before. At night, they cooked together, shared stories in low voices, and rebuilt the trust that had been stolen from both of them by people they once loved. They didn't talk about love, not yet. But it was there, in the way Jace watched her when she laughed for the first time in weeks, in the way Meredith reached for his hand without thinking, in the way neither of them looked at the scar on her face like it defined anything at all. One evening, as they stood under the porch, watching the sun set over the drenched earth, Meredith said, "You know what we are?" Jace glanced sideways. "What?" "Two survivors," she said. "But I'm done surviving. I want to live." He smiled faintly, the kind that reached the corners of his eyes. "Then let's live, darlin'. Let's live so loud the bastards hunting you wish they stayed in hell." And from that moment forward, they didn't look back. The morning they sent the files, the sky was clear, eerily clear. No clouds, no wind, just stillness, like the land itself was holding its breath. May sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open before her. Around her were flash drives, sealed envelopes, printed pages with signatures and dates. Everything she had risked her life to gather. She clicked send on the last email, addressed to the state attorney general's office and an independent investigative news outlet she knew could not be bought. Beside her, Jace stood quiet, his hand on her shoulder. "It's done?" she nodded. "It's out of our hands now." But they both knew it wouldn't be that easy. 2 days later, they came. It was just past midnight when the first motion sensor tripped. Jace was already half-dressed when he heard the sound. Boots, too many of them, moving through dirt like they owned it. He grabbed the shotgun and headed out the back, signaling with a flashlight to the hills. Meredith had been working with more than just papers. Quietly, through local contacts, she had warned the few people she trusted in the community. Ranchers, outlaws turned fathers, women who ran safe houses and trailer parks. People who didn't need proof to believe her because they had all been touched by the long reach of the McAllen corruption. Tonight they showed up, not to fight for her, to fight with her. The attackers came in military formation. 5 SUVs, blacked out, headlights off, tactical gear, flash suppressors. They weren't just men, they were trained. But they didn't expect a dozen country folk who knew every inch of the land. The first clash happened near the eastern fence. Jace flanked them, fired into the air, drawing attention. Someone else dropped a tire spike under their lead vehicle. One man fell into a covered trench they'd dug the night before. It wasn't a war, but it was enough to hold them. Meredith was in the barn, safe behind the steel-reinforced tack room. She didn't want to hide, but Jace made her swear it. "You're not dying for this. Not here. Not now." By the time the sheriff's backup arrived, Alerted via a burner phone Meredith had smuggled to a friend in the DA's office, the skirmish was winding down. 3 of the attackers were on the ground, zip-tied with baling twine. 2 had fled and were caught by locals with rifles and cold anger in their eyes. The sheriff didn't ask many questions. The files Meredith had sent had already reached his desk. What he saw tonight confirmed everything. By sunrise, the news had broken. McAllen family implicated in statewide land fraud scheme. Investigations were underway. Subpoenas had been issued. Arrests followed. And then came the final blow. Meredith's brother, Thomas McAllen, was apprehended trying to cross into Mexico in a private jet, found with offshore documents and multiple fake passports. He was flown back in handcuffs, and Meredith stood waiting for him when the FBI brought him to the regional courthouse. She wore jeans, a plain white shirt, boots caked in ranch mud, no scarf. The scar across her face caught the light as she stepped forward, fearless. Thomas was thinner than she remembered. Arrogant still, but his eyes betrayed confusion, disbelief that his little sister had survived, fought back, and won. They let her speak. 1 minute. She stood inches from him. "You always said land was power," she said calmly, "that whoever held it made the rules. You destroyed lives chasing that," he scoffed. "And now what? You think they'll love you for this? You turned on your own blood." "I didn't turn," she said. "I just stopped pretending I was blind." Her voice dropped, but her eyes didn't waver. "You said land is power, but you were wrong. It's responsibility, and I'm going to use every acre you tried to steal to fix what you broke." He laughed bitterly. "You're nothing without that name." She smiled faintly. "That's where you're wrong again. I'm more now than I ever was inside your empire." He was led away after that, shouting over his shoulder, but she didn't hear the words. Behind her, Jace waited near the courthouse steps, hat in hand. When she came down, she didn't say a word, just fell into his arms. "You did it," he murmured. "We did it," she replied. Above them, the courthouse bell rang out, like a long-delayed promise finally fulfilled. The following weeks passed like a breath held too long, finally exhaled. The investigations confirmed what Meredith had fought to prove. Her brother and his partners were indicted. The McAllen name no longer whispered in power, but shouted in scandal. Her own name, Meredith McAllen, was cleared. The attempted murder charges against her brother stuck. The land was traced, restored, and many of the people who had been forcibly pushed off their homes were offered restitution. But more than that, Meredith had the chance to choose who she would be, now that she no longer had to hide. She chose May. It was the name she wore when she first felt free, when she first felt loved, not because of a title or lineage or last name, but because of who she was at her core. With her name restored and legal protection secured, she declined every interview, every invitation to return to high society. She refused to be the face of redemption for a dynasty she no longer cared to claim. Instead, she filed a series of quiet land deeds, restructured trusts, and redirected the wealth once hoarded by McAllen Holdings into something new, something real. Dust Haven Ranch was reborn. The barn was rebuilt. The fields were refenced. The house was patched and painted, still humble but warm again. But the biggest change wasn't in the buildings, it was in the people. May and Jace opened their gates to the ones who had nowhere left to go. Women who had escaped abuse with nothing but their kids. Farmers who had lost land to bad loans and broken promises. Teenagers living in cars, out of school, out of hope. Dust Haven became more than a ranch. It became a refuge. Jace taught the boys how to build fences, how to tend to horses, how to fix an engine with little more than grit and duct tape. May taught the women how to read legal papers, how to reclaim their names, how to look at the mirror and not apologize for the past. Together they built more than a home. They built a beginning. One evening as the sun dipped low and gold poured across the hills, Jace and May stood by the newly finished split-rail fence, watching a group of kids chase each other across the pasture. Jace reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch, weathered at the corner. He turned to her. "I don't got much," he said. "Never did. But I've got this." Inside was a ring, silver, simple, with a small piece of turquoise set into the band. Not flashy, not expensive, but worn with history and care. "It was my ma's," he added. "My pa gave it to her before they ever had a house. Just had land, and sky, and promises." He gently took her hand and slipped the ring onto her finger. "I don't need a church," he said quietly. "Don't need no crowd. Just land, sky, and you saying yes." May looked down at the ring, her breath catching, then up at him, his weather-worn face, his honest eyes, the steady way he stood with her, never in front, never behind. She didn't cry. She smiled, wide and real. "Yes," she said. And for the first time since her life was torn apart, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like home. 1 year later, Dust Haven Ranch had become something no one, not even May, could have imagined. Once a quiet, half-burned property on the edge of nowhere, it now pulsed with quiet life. Rising smoke from the cookhouse, soft laughter echoing from the barn, and the rhythmic thump of boots on red earth. The land hadn't changed much. The hills still rolled gentle and wide, and the sky still stretched so far it felt like a second ocean above them. But the people had changed. Or maybe they'd just been allowed to heal. Jace and May lived in the same old house, repaired but not replaced. It was part of their promise to never forget the cracks they'd climbed out of. May had never returned to the McAllen estate, never reclaimed her former home. This place, these acres, these fences, this wind, this was home now. And she wasn't just surviving it, she was building it. May used the land she owned not to divide, but to gather. Over the past year, she'd quietly transferred parcels to a new foundation, the Haven Trust, funded entirely by the McAllen inheritance she had chosen to repurpose. She built a small schoolhouse at the edge of the property where children from broken homes learned not just reading and writing, but trust and compassion. Next to it, she erected a legal aid center in a whitewashed trailer where women from miles around came to untangle the messes of paperwork and pasts. On the north side of the ranch, a sanctuary for injured horses and abandoned animals took shape. A symbol of what Dust Haven was really for. People who had been discarded, bruised, hunted, they came here, and they stayed. Jace kept things running, fixing tractors and broken fences, teaching the boys how to repair engines and break wild horses without breaking their spirits. He never liked attention, never took credit, but everyone knew that without him, the heart of the place would beat a little quieter. He and May shared a love that needed no ceremonies, no rings beyond the one she wore on her left hand. Their connection was built in silence and soil, in firewood stacked high, in bruises wrapped carefully, in laughter shared over burnt coffee, and the scar on her face, it remained. Faint, silvered, a memory etched in skin. But it no longer defined her. The children didn't ask about it. The women saw it and nodded like they understood, and Jace, from the very first day, had looked through it like it was never there. "Scars fade," he'd said once, brushing his thumb across her cheek. "Love doesn't." One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon and the air turned golden and soft, May stood near the stables holding the reins of 3 small horses. Around her were 6 children, barefoot, giggling, eyes wide with a joy they'd forgotten was possible. "Easy now," she said gently, helping one little girl into the saddle. "Let the horse feel your weight. She'll carry you if you let her." The girl clutched the horn tightly. "What if I fall?" May smiled. "Then we get back up. That's what we do around here." One by one, the children rode across the open pasture, their laughter mixing with the whinnies of horses and the rustle of prairie grass. Jace leaned against the fence, arms crossed, watching her like he always did, not with possession but pride. As the sky turned to fire, May rode behind the children, her own horse moving slow and steady, her silhouette long against the light. Her face, turned slightly toward the wind, caught the last rays of sunlight. The scar was still visible, but it was no longer what people saw first. Now they saw her smile, the one that only comes when the soul knows peace. As she passed under the ranch's front arch, The wooden sign overhead creaked gently in the breeze. The words carved into the wood, weathered and bold, read, "Dust Haven, where scars fade and souls begin again." And beneath it, in small letters only the closest would notice, someone had etched a second line, "Founded by two survivors who chose to love louder than fear." The wind picked up, carrying laughter, hay, and the scent of something new. Not just survival, not even justice, but joy. And so, from fire and fear, betrayal and scars, came something far greater than escape. A life rebuilt, a love reborn, and a sanctuary where the broken could become whole again. May and Jace did not just survive, they chose to live, to give, and to turn their pain into purpose. If this story moved your heart, reminded you of the strength it takes to heal, and the beauty of love that sees beyond scars, then we invite you to be part of our journey. Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more tales of resilience, redemption, and the quiet power of human kindness, because here, every story is a second chance.